that is actually the sound. Here, let me set this aside now. So I was able to make that drum, and then oh yeah, you got to see the stitching on the side too. So that's also cow skin right there. Hi, I'm James Kerr. I'm a tattoo artist, musician, and a trauma survivor. Been on this healing journey for a long time now, and it's led me here talking to you. I enjoy talking about heavy stuff like life, death, spirituality, trauma, and ways to cope with trauma. But it's not all serious. I like to joke a lot too. Welcome to the Fire of Truth podcast. This is a good conversation that I had with Roxy. I really, really appreciated her perspective on tattooing in general. I definitely have a similar perspective when it comes to tattooing and how it affects people, how it can really help people through hard times and help people express themselves. Really, there is quite a bit of medicinal reasons why people get tattooed, and essentially it's all transformative. People walk into the shop, they're a certain way, they get the tattoo, and they walk out of the shop different than when they came in. So having this kind of medicinal outlook on tattooing in general, I think really resonated with me, especially being from the regional culture where I grew up in the Hoopa Valley. I really have been influenced tremendously by the native perspective and indigenous perspective on things. And so I definitely have had experiences in my life when I'm tattooing people. There was one client of mine that she had lost her fiance literally 3 days before the tattoo session. And it was a walk-in and I had time. So serendipitously, this tattoo happened and I was able to give her a memorial tattoo for her fiance that she lost 3 days before in a motorcycle accident. And she was sitting in the chair and she was crying. More recently, my aunt who lost her husband, my uncle, I did a couple of tattoos memorializing him on her body. And I think it was helpful. At least that's my intention. My intention is to be helpful in those situations and really be able to sit with someone, let them express themselves and how they feel. And so a lot of times there's a lot of tears. And, a lot of times we as tattoo artists can go through what's called, I think it's called vicarious trauma. So we could, especially if we're sensitive. So because we're artists already. So we're already sensitive. And, when other people come and sit in our chair, we end up taking on a lot of the energy that they bring in. And knowing that and being aware of that is really essential. And I think we talked about that in this last episode as well, a little bit, about having to really be able to self-regulate yourself and really keep yourself in check as far as emotionally taking on too much of other people's energy. You have to be able to do that while at the same time taking care of yourself. So it's very important to be able to do that. One of the things, though, that really struck me with this conversation was when we talked about our connection to ancestors and how she does the dancing in her culture in order to do that, to pray to the ancestors through dance and stuff. And that really struck a chord with me in many layers. For one, just, being an outsider, feeling like an outsider in the culture that I grew up in, really hit me a bit in that moment. I'm still so privileged to have been able to witness what I saw with the Hoopa people, with the white deerskin dance and that kind of thing. It was really, really awesome. And even now when I hear native songs like praying on the drums and hearing that, it just really hits me in my soul, and it makes me feel so alive, and it's amazing. That was one of the things that I got to experience as a little kid too. I remember in elementary school. Like native elders would come into the school and play on their drums in front of the class, and that was so amazing. And actually, one of the things I got to show you. All right, I'm back. If you're listening to this podcast on, if you're just listening, you're not watching on YouTube, you're not going to be able to see this, but this is a native drum that I made when I was in fifth grade. And I was part of the Gifted and Talented program at Hoopa Elementary. And we all went down to a place called Hostler Creek, a little creek that ran through the valley off the river, the Trinity River. And there was a cow carcass chilling in the creek. And traditionally, the Hoopa people would use deer skin, but they didn't kill a deer for this. This is basically just to teach us how to make a drum, and I was able to. And so we ended up, and if you can't see this here, that is actually the sound. Here, let me set this aside now. So I was able to make that drum, and then, oh yeah, you got to see the stitching on the side too. So that's also cow skin right there. Yeah. Traditionally, like I said, it's made out of deer skin. So, but yeah, so we got to this creek, and we the cow was there, and the teacher did the skinning, and then took the skin off, and the skin was still wet. That's why it was left in the creek, so the skin would stay wet. And then we hammered the 2x4s together, and then we stretched the wet skin over it, and then laced it up with more skin. Then we set it out to dry, and as it dried, the skin would tighten over the wood, and so it was all holding itself together. Then you get that tone, this tone right here. And for years, I was supposed to make a mallet that goes with that. And this was when I was in fifth grade, and I never got around to it. So I finally reached out to, I had a consultation with a friend of mine in the tattoo shop, and she reached out to someone that she knew how to make them, and then asked him for me, and then gave me the instructions. So I'm going to make a mallet and finally finish this project that I started so long ago. Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, and so that's why what she was saying resonated so much with me, as far as like the medicine of tattooing. Like, it's a very, very for me a spiritual experience to give a tattoo, to receive a tattoo. It's an expression of my connection with everyone. I feel like I'm connected to everyone I tattooed in the past, and will tattoo, even though I don't know you yet. I'm also connected to the people. It's an expression of the connection to the people that I got tattooed from too. So pretty neat. And in that way, it's definitely medicine, especially when you're talking about like trauma stuff. The opposite of trauma is connection. And so looking down on my arm, I'm like, yep, I am connected. So the connection, I'm connected to my ancestors too. And that's one of the other things. Like, for a few days afterwards, I was really missing my parents. Like, I really have developed these rituals around my grief that helps me feel my connection to my parents. That's one of the things I've been doing to cope with my grief. And then, thinking about my grandparents, they're all gone now. Thinking about all my great aunts and uncles and everything, like, really like hit home and reminded me of the importance of remembering where I come from. Despite how complicated my relationships were with them, that ultimately at the end of life, none of that really matters, because what really matters is that they loved me, and I know that, and I love them, and they knew that. And right now I'm dealing with some of the repressed anger that I have for my father. I'm dealing with that in therapy, and that's been really good for me. There's definitely some guilt that I'm also dealing with when I express that anger. I'm doing it in little ways. Like, I'll see something of his and flip it off. Like, but then I'm like, I'm sorry. But that's, also a conditioned response whenever I express my anger to my father. It's always like, oh, careful. That's dangerous. But it's been really good for me. And but I really, really understand more now that my all of my ancestors are gone, except for there's a lot that aren't, but my direct ancestors, I'm talking up through my parents. So I do have a lot of aunts and uncles, thankfully, that are still alive on my mom's side, and I have an uncle on my dad's side that's still with us too. So it's good to have family, and it's good to that those connections are available and there. And if we're talking about any sort of trauma recovery, any sort of trauma healing, it's really narrows down to relationships. Relationships with the people around you, and how effective that is, and how healthy that is for you, or unhealthy, like it, and your relationship to yourself, which is ultimately where all relationships start, and how all relationships get expressed is, if I am not cool with who I am, then that's going to reflect out, and I'm going to project that out on people in my judgments of them. As a society at large, we can reverse engineer a lot of our problems down to the way the individuals feel about themselves and think about themselves. Yeah, and I think I'm super grateful that I have that awareness, and that I have the resources with the coaches and the therapy that I go to, and the community that I'm involved in, and with all of that, in the tattoo community and the metal music community as well. I have my wife, my son, all of that. I'm very grateful to have all of that. And that's essentially what this conversation sparked in me. The healing properties of art and tattoos, it's very, very transformative and all about expression. So my job has been, for the last 20 years almost, to help people express themselves, and to help people wear their hearts on their sleeve, quite literally. Well, not literally. I'm not cutting their hearts out and putting them on their arms. And then to honor my ancestors, despite what are the complications that I had, because I'm the sum total of them. And so it's also honoring myself. There's ultimately in my mind, when it comes to connections and all of that I try to get rid of my definitions and my distinctions between self and other. So how I think of myself is how I think of other people, and how I think of other people is also how I think of myself, because life is a mirror. And I'm grateful to all of you for listening. I'm grateful for the tattoo industry for helping me, keeping me safe and fed, housed. Yeah. Much love, y'all.